Welcome to Dark Deeds and Conspiracy, the podcast that unearths chilling true crimes and mind-bending conspiracies. Each episode, we explore a dark corner of history or a mystery that still haunts us today. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're heading to a place where, well, the earth itself kind of breathes steam. It whispers these stories of a past that's almost been swallowed whole.
We're talking about Centralia, right, in Pennsylvania.
Exactly. Centralia, Pennsylvania, up in Columbia County. It's basically a ghost town now, but with this incredible burning secret underneath.
A coal mine fire. And it's been burning since, 1962?
Since 1962. And the estimates say it could burn for another 250 years or even more. It's unbelievable.
Truly staggering.
So our mission today in this deep dive is to really unpack the story of Centralia. You know, how it went from this bustling town to this eerie landscape we see today, using the info we've gathered.
And it's quite a story. It really makes you think, how could this happen? A seemingly normal American town just burning from below for decades.
To get it, you really have to go back, see where it started.
You do. You have to understand its origins.
Yeah. Because today, looking at it, it's hard to imagine. But Centralia wasn't always like this. It was founded way back in 1866.
And the reason? Coal. Anthracite coal, specifically.
Right, that was the key. And by the early 1900s, this place was thriving. Almost 2,700 residents.
That's a decent-sized town for the time.
Totally. Think about this. 5 hotels, 27 saloons.
37, wow.
Yeah, a lot of thirsty miners, I guess, plus 7 churches, even a couple of theaters. It was really buzzing.
And the engine behind all that was definitely the coal. That anthracite was valuable stuff.
For sure. And getting it out was crucial. You had railways coming in, like the Mine Run Railroad back in 1854, even before the town was officially founded.
The Lehigh and Mahanoy line later in 1865, those were vital for transport, getting the coal to market.
So coal wasn't just like an industry there, it was the industry, the whole town's heartbeat.
Absolutely. But, resource towns often face that boom and bust cycle.
True. And it happened here, too. After World War I, things started to slow down a bit. Coal production wasn't quite what it was.
And then came the big one, the Wall Street crash of 1929.
Oof. Yeah, that must have hit hard.
It did. It led to the closure of the main employer, the Lehigh Valley Coal Company mines. That was a massive blow.
But mining didn't just stop entirely then, did it?
No, it didn't just vanish. It became different, more fragmented, less regulated.
And that kind of set the stage for later problems.
You could definitely argue that. You had this practice called pillar robbing become more common.
Pillar robbing, what's that exactly?
Well, you had these smaller mining operations, sometimes called bootleg miners. They weren't always authorized.
Okay.
And they'd go into the abandoned mines and basically take coal from the pillars that were left behind to, hold up the roof.
Oh, wow. That sounds incredibly dangerous.
It was. It made the whole underground network really unstable, lots of collapses, and this maze of weakened tunnels. That became a huge problem when the fire started later.
Right, you can see how that would complicate things. Interestingly, the town council actually bought the mineral rights under Centralia in 1950.
Yeah, which shows you how central coal still was to their identity and, their future plans, even then.
So mining, in some form, kept going right into the 1960s.
It did. And bootleg mining unofficially continued even longer, maybe into the early 80s. Plus, there's still some strip mining happening in the wider area even now.
That's wild. But the train's stopping service in 1966, that feels like another turning point, doesn't it? Like the decline was already cemented before the fire really took over everything.
That's a really good point. The town was already facing economic struggles. And maybe that meant less focus or fewer resources for things like, say, managing the town landfill properly.
Ah, and the landfill. That brings us right to the fire itself, doesn't it? May 1962.
That's the day everyone points to. The most widely accepted story is that it started with a routine trash fire at the town dump.
Okay, walk us through that. The council asked some volunteer firefighters to clean up the landfill, which was in an old strip mine pit near a cemetery.
That's right, the Oddfellows Cemetery. And yeah, the plan was pretty standard for the time. Set the trash on fire to reduce the volume. They'd done it before.
But this time was different.
This time, apparently, the fire wasn't completely put out. Or maybe it smoldered deeper than they thought. And somehow it reached an unsealed opening, a gap, that led down into those abandoned mine tunnels we were just talking about.
And it ignited the coal seam.
Exactly. That's the prevailing theory. But, it's interesting. There are actually other versions of the story, too.
Oh, like what?
Well, some accounts, even notes from borough council meetings around that time, mention maybe 2 fires at the dump, or suggest the fire might have started a day earlier, perhaps from someone dumping hot ash or hot coals from, a coal burner.
So maybe not the controlled burn?
It's possible it wasn't just the controlled burn. And then there's this older theory that pops up sometimes.
What's that?
About a fire back in 1932, the Bass Colliery Fire. The idea is that maybe that fire was never truly extinguished and just smoldered underground for, 30 years.
30 years, wow. And then it reached the landfill area.
That's the theory. But we have this account from a local miner, Frank Jurgill Sr., who strongly disagreed.
Oh, yeah. What did he say?
He said he and his brother were actually mining near that landfill area in the early 60s. Bootleg mining, probably. And he argued that if that old Bass Colliery fire had been active nearby, they would have known. They would have been dealing with dangerous gases.
That makes sense. So even the exact starting point is a bit murky.
It has its own little mysteries, definitely. Which brings up the question of responsibility, too.
How so?
Well, the borough was legally required to put these fire-resistant clay barriers in the landfill between the layers of trash.
To prevent exactly this kind of thing, presumably.
Right, but it seems that wasn't fully done. That barrier was incomplete, and without it, the heat from the surface fire could more easily penetrate down to the coal seam below.
So a combination of maybe bad luck and perhaps some corners being cut on safety.
It certainly looks that way. An unfortunate accident meeting potentially overlooked regulations.
And once it started, trying to put out an underground coal mine fire, that sounds incredibly difficult.
Oh, it is. And the initial attempts, well, they just didn't work.
What did they try? I read about flooding. Excavating.
Yeah, they tried flooding sections of the mine with water. They tried digging out the burning material. They tried digging these huge trenches, fire breaks, to try and stop it from spreading.
And none of it worked.
Not effectively. They even pumped in something called fly ash slurry. It's like this mixture that's supposed to smother flames.
Why did these fail? Was the fire just too big already?
Partly that, yes. But also, remember those unstable interconnected tunnels? The fire was deep, often in collapsed sections, making it hard to reach.
Okay.
And if you blocked it in one place, the fire just followed the coal seam and found a different route through that maze of tunnels.
Like trying to put out a fire in a giant ant farm.
That's not a bad analogy, actually. Plus, all these efforts were incredibly expensive and dangerous for the people doing the work.
And you mentioned maybe a lack of urgency at first.
Yeah, it seems in the very early days, maybe people didn't fully grasp the scale of what they were dealing with.
Yeah.
That delay allowed the fire to really establish itself, making it exponentially harder to stop later on. It's tough fighting something you can't fully see, unfolding right under your feet.
It sounds like it took a while for the reality, the sheer danger, to really sink in for the townspeople.
It did. For years, it was kind of this known problem, but maybe not seen as an immediate existential threat of everyone.
Until things started happening that were impossible to ignore, like that story about the gas station owner in 1979.
Ah, yes. He measured the temperature of the gasoline in his underground storage tank.
And it was.
172 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow. That's incredibly hot. That's cooking the gasoline.
Exactly. It was a very clear, very alarming sign that the fire wasn't just somewhere down there. It was getting dangerously close to the surface. It literally brought the heat home.
But the real turning point, the thing everyone remembers, that was the incident with the young boy, right?
Absolutely. Todd Domboski. That was 1981.
Tell us what happened. It's such a defining moment.
He was just 12 years old, playing in his grandmother's backyard. And suddenly, the ground just opened up beneath him. A sinkhole.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. About 150 feet deep, apparently. Steam and gas pouring out. Miraculously, he managed to grab onto a tree root sticking out from the side.
And someone rescued him.
His cousin pulled him out. It was incredibly close. And when they tested the air coming from that hole...
Lethal carbon monoxide.
Exactly.
Wow.
Lethal levels. It was undeniable proof of the invisible, deadly danger right under the town. That incident shocked everyone. It got national attention.
That must have been the moment where people thought, okay, we can't live here anymore.
For many, yes. That really shifted the public perception and, crucially, the government response. After that, things started moving much faster.
So relocation efforts finally began in earnest.
Yes, starting around 1983. The government allocated a significant amount of money, over $42 million eventually, for buyouts, buying people's homes and businesses.
Did most people take the offer?
The majority did, yes. Faced with the evidence, the danger, many felt they had no choice. But it wasn't simple. The community was actually deeply divided.
Divided? How so? Weren't people scared?
Well, yes, but people interpreted the risk differently. Some felt the danger was immediate and everywhere. Others thought it was localized or maybe exaggerated. Sociologists who studied the town at the time, Kroll-Smith and Couch, they identified like 6 different groups within the community, all with different views on the fire and what should be done.
Wow, 6 groups. That must have made an already traumatic situation even harder. All that disagreement within the town.
Absolutely. Imagine trying to decide whether to leave your home, your history, everything you know, while your neighbors are arguing about whether the threat is even real. It was incredibly painful.
The population numbers tell that story starkly, don't they? From around 1,000 people in 1980.
Down to just 63 by 1990.
63! That's a collapse. A mass exodus in just a decade.
It really was. The town fundamentally changed. But even as most people left, the story wasn't over for those who stayed.
Right, because the state eventually stepped in with eminent domain.
Exactly. In 1992, Pennsylvania invoked eminent domain on all the remaining properties.
Which basically means the government can take private property for public use, even if the owners don't want to sell.
Correct. The idea was that the danger constituted a public nuisance or hazard that required clearing the area.
Did the remaining residents fight it?
Oh, yes. They took it to court, arguing against the seizure of their homes. But ultimately, their legal challenges failed.
And then came other blows, almost symbolic ones, like losing the zip code.
Yeah. In 2002, the Postal Service discontinued Centralia's zip code, 17927. It felt like another step in erasing the town from the map.
And the authorities kept pushing people out, trying to get the last houses empty.
They did. The number of occupied homes just kept dwindling. You mentioned the numbers. 16 homes standing in 2006, then just 11 by 2009, down to maybe 5 or so by 2010. It was a slow, relentless process.
But there was eventually some kind of settlement for the very last holdouts.
Yes. Finally, in 2013, a deal was reached with the last 7 residents.
What did the deal involve?
They were given the legal right to live in their homes for the rest of their lives. They also received some financial compensation. But the key condition was that once they passed away, their properties would automatically belong to the state.
So basically a lifetime estate, but ensuring the town would eventually be completely empty.
Pretty much. It marked the end of that long legal fight.
Which brings us to today. Fewer than 5 residents, you said, as of 2020.
That's the figure often cited, making it the least populated municipality in the entire state of Pennsylvania.
Just imagine living there now. What does it even look like?
It's sparse. You've got those few remaining homes kind of scattered. You see streets that just lead nowhere, abruptly ending. Lots of empty lots where houses and businesses used to be. Maybe just a foundation left.
And nature taking over.
Definitely. A lot of new growth forest creeping in, reclaiming the grid of the old town. It's quite a powerful image, actually.
But underneath it all, the fire's still there, still burning.
Oh, yeah. It's still very much active. You can see the signs. Steam venting from the ground, especially on damp or cold days.
Smoke coming up through cracks.
Sometimes, yeah. Particularly along that abandoned stretch of Route 61 and in other areas where the ground has fissured. There are still warning signs up, reminding visitors about the unstable ground and the carbon monoxide risk.
That abandoned Route 61, that became famous as Graffiti Highway, didn't it?
It did. For years, it was this incredible, constantly changing canvas of graffiti art covering the cracked, buckled pavement. It drew a lot of photographers, urban explorers. It became this weird tourist destination.
But they covered it up recently.
Yeah, in 2020. The owners of the land brought in truckloads of dirt and buried it under these big mounds, mostly to stop people from trespassing, because it was still dangerous.
End of an era for graffiti artists, I guess. It's strange, though, amidst all this decay and abandonment, some things still persist, like the cemeteries.
That's true. They're reportedly kept in surprisingly good shape, maintained most likely by descendants or former residents who still feel that connection.
And the church. There's still an active church.
Remarkably, yes. The Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary Ukrainian Catholic Church, they still hold regular services, I believe, weekly.
How is that even possible? Isn't it in danger from the fire?
Apparently not. There's a geological reason. Studies found the church was built on solid bedrock, not directly over the burning coal. Seems like much of the town was.
So sheer luck of location.
Seems that way. The rock underneath it acted as a natural barrier, protecting it from the heat and the subsidence, the ground collapsing. It's quite something.
That's amazing. And the old municipal building is still there, too?
It's still standing. And incredibly, it's still used. Occasionally. They have an annual cleanup day organized there. Volunteers come to pick up trash that gets illegally dumped. which is sadly a problem in abandoned areas.
And they planted apple trees recently.
Yeah, in 2021. A small gesture, maybe, but a hopeful one. Planting something new in a place defined by destruction.
And the Borough Council was still meeting, at least as of a decade ago.
As recently as 2011, yes. It's this picture of just incredible tenacity, isn't it? A community clinging to its formal existence against all odds.
It really is. And with a story this dramatic, this weird, it's no surprise that myths and legends have sprung up around Centralia.
Oh, absolutely. It's fertile ground for that kind of thing.
The most famous one has to be the gateway to hell idea, right?
That's the big one. You can see why, though. The steam rising from the earth, the smell of sulfur sometimes, maybe seeing glowing embers deep in a crack at night. It's easy to let your imagination run wild.
And didn't a former pastor reportedly say the town was cursed? That adds to the vibe.
It certainly fuels that particular image. Then you get the more out there stuff.
Like what? People living underground?
Yeah, rumors of maybe mutated former miners or residents who adapted to living down in the hot tunnels. Total fiction, of course, zero evidence. But it pops up in horror stories inspired by the place.
It taps into that fear of the unknown beneath our feet.
Definitely. And then there's the fear of the ground eats people.
Which, I mean, sounds dramatic, but it's based on a real danger, isn't it? The sinkholes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Todd Dabowski incident made that terrifyingly real. So while eats people is an exaggeration, the danger of sudden ground collapse or scalding steam vents is absolutely genuine.
And ghost stories. Minor ghosts.
Of course, given the town's history, the mining disasters even before the fire, the sense of loss, it's almost inevitable. People report hearing whispers, seeing shadowy figures in the mist, maybe the sound of old coal carps.
The atmosphere alone must contribute to that. The quiet, the emptiness.
Absolutely. Darkness and silence can play tricks on you. And Centralia has plenty of both.
Now, we have to mention Silent Hill, the video game, the movies. Centralia was the inspiration, right?
Visually, yes. The creators have acknowledged that. The fog, the abandoned streets, the fire element. You can see the aesthetic connection very clearly.
But just the look of it, not the story.
Right. It's crucial to separate them. The actual plot of Silent Hill, with its monsters and specific supernatural lore, that's all fictional. It's not based on anything that actually happened or was believed in Centralia. It borrowed the atmosphere, not the history or legends.
Good clarification. What about conspiracy theories? Any of those?
Oh, yeah. A persistent one is that the fire wasn't an accident, or at least it was deliberately allowed to burn.
Why would anyone do that?
The theory usually centers on the coal, that this was all a long-term plan, a cover story, for the state to eventually get its hands on the incredibly valuable anthracite coal reserves still under the town.
Linking back to the eminent domain and mineral rights issues.
Exactly. Proponents point to the slow initial response to the fire, and then the eventual government takeover of the land as suspicious. There's no hard proof, but it feeds into a narrative of mistrust.
Okay. Any other weird beliefs? I read something about animals.
Yeah, there are anecdotal claims about strange animal behavior, animals avoiding the area or acting erratically. People speculate maybe it's the gases or even some kind of magnetic disturbance from the fire. Hard to verify, of course.
And just classic ghost stuff. Phantom footsteps, figures disappearing.
Those too. Standard ghost story elements that get attached to spooky places.
And this feeling that the town can just never be rebuilt.
Yeah, beyond the legal condemnation, there's sometimes this almost supernatural feeling attached to it. Like the land itself is scarred, cursed by the fire, and won't allow people to return.
It's amazing how many layers there are. History, tragedy, folklore, and then there are just some plain weird facts about the place, too.
Definitely. Like, did you know a strip club actually opened and operated there for a while after most people had left?
Seriously, in practically abandoned Centralia.
Apparently so. It's such a bizarre, incongruous detail.
That is wild. What else?
Well, the fact that there are still all these underground mine tunnels, some explored by urban adventurers, but incredibly dangerous, prone to collapse.
Right. Definitely not something to try. And its online fame? Atlas Obscura, BuzzFeed Unsolved.
Yeah, it's become a sort of dark tourism icon online. Which keeps the story alive, but also attracts trespassers sometimes.
Even simple things like no traffic lights left just shows how much infrastructure vanished.
Exactly. Or the occasional site somebody reports seeing fresh flowers left on the steps of one of the few remaining houses. Little sign of connection.
Oh, and the time capsule. I read about that. They buried one in 1966.
They did, full of hope for the town's centennial. But they ended up digging it up early in 2014 because, well, The town wasn't really going to be there for its bicentennial.
What was inside? Anything interesting?
Kind of a poignant mix. A miner's helmet and lamp, naturally. A piece of coal. A Bible. Some local souvenirs from '66. And apparently a pair of bloomers signed by some local men.
Bloomers. Okay, that's memorable. A real snapshot of a different time right before everything changed.
Definitely. A time capsule opened not in celebration, but almost in resignation.
It keeps coming back to this, doesn't it? The feeling among some people that this wasn't just about safety, that mineral rights questions seem central to the lingering distrust.
It really does. That belief that the state used eminent domain not just to protect people, but as a way to eventually get control of that valuable anthracite coal, it's a powerful undercurrent in the story.
And there's a specific legal angle to that concern, isn't there? About the borough potentially ceasing to exist.
Yes, exactly. Pennsylvania state law has provisions where if a municipality effectively dissolves, meaning if there aren't enough residents to form a functioning government, hold elections, etc., then assets owned by that borough, like mineral rights, could revert to the Commonwealth.
So if Centralia eventually has 0 residents or can't function as a borough,
then the mineral rights currently owned by the borough of Centralia could, theoretically, end up owned by the state of Pennsylvania.
you can see why that fuels suspicion then. Whether it was the intent or not, it could be the eventual outcome.
Precisely. It adds a whole other layer of complexity and controversy to the state's actions over the years.
So when you pull it all together, Centralia is just this incredible mix. It's real history, it's a tragic accident, it's decades of legal fights, it's environmental disaster, and it's this rich layer of myth and legend on top.
It really is multifaceted. The past isn't just history there. It's literally still burning, still shaping the present. It shapes the land, and it shapes the stories people tell.
It's such a stark example, isn't it, of what can happen when our lives are so closely tied to extracting resources from the earth. The unintended consequences can be just immense and last for centuries.
It's a powerful lesson etched in smoke and steam, a story about community, loss, resilience in its own way, but also about the sheer, unpredictable power of the earth when disturbed.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. When we look at Centralia's story, this fire still burning after more than 60 years, what does it make us think about the long-term consequences we need to consider now, today, when our communities, our economies are built on resources that won't last forever?
That's a heavy question, but one Centralia forces us to ask.
It really does. Well, thanks for taking this deep dive into the fire beneath Centralia with us.
Thanks for listening to Dark Deeds and Conspiracy. If this story intrigued you, tap the like and subscribe buttons. It helps more than you know. Got a case you want us to cover? Drop it in the comments. New episodes posted on Tuesdays. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and never stop searching for the truth.